Hi, everybody. It was a pleasure to be invited for this event. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but I'm here with this presentation for you from Brazil, and I hope you enjoy it. This another one for about TMS WEB Core. This time, I'm going to talk about the integration of TMS WEB Core with TMS XData. TMS WEB Core, as you might already know by now, it's a client-only framework. So it builds nice applications that run entirely in the browser. But in some types of applications, you have to use data from database, for example, from a backend. And this is where XData comes in. XData is a framework from TMS software to build a backend REST server, and it works by itself. You can use it clients built with the regular Delphi desktop clients or even other types of clients. But it also has a nice integration with TMS Web Core that makes it even easier to have a backend and the web clients communicate together. I will start this presentation showing you how to create a XData server from scratch in a very easy way, and then I will start to integrate call methods and extract data from the server using TMS Web Core. Let me create a new application here. I will create a VCL form application because that's what I and maybe probably you are used to. You can create console applications or Windows Service applications, whatever type of application you want to create. Because the XData server, it's independent of it. It's just a server that runs in a Delphi application. To start with, this is the main component here, XData server, and it has one key property here, which is the base URL. This is the URL that the server is going to listen. It's the base one. So I'm going to use here a let's use the port 2001 TMS because that's the default that is available. That's the default address that's available when we install TMS Business. You can use different ones, of course. And you notice here that the TMS XData server needs a dispatcher because the XData server represents the logic processing of requests, but it's the dispatcher that will handle the actual low-level HTTP requests and send to the XData server. For that, I'm going to use the HTTP sys dispatcher from Sparkle, which is the one that uses Microsoft IIS under the hood. It doesn't require IIS, but it's the same technology in Windows, so it's very robust and reliable. So here I assign the XData server to the dispatcher, and I can set active property at runtime, but I can also use here a design time, so I don't have to do that from code. And if I run this application now, the server is already running. I can go to the browser here and ask what do you have at the root address. So there is a response here, so the server is running already. And let me close here, and to start with, start adding logic to the server. I can create service operations, which is server-side business logic. For that, we have a new wizard here with accessible by file new, TMS business, new XData service. I will name my service here. Let's call it hello, and add sample methods, and let's use a single unit for interface and implementation here. This is, if you create separate interface and implementations, you can reuse the interface when you build client applications using the regular desktop applications. But since we don't use the interface in TMS WEB Core, I will just create everything in a single unit so that we have less complicated code here. And here's how it works. It has an interface and a class that implements an interface. And it's very simple. You just add methods to the interface and implement it here. Here is the sample methods that Wizard creates. It's just an echo string and sum method with obvious implementations here. The sum receives 2 parameters and adds them, and the echo string returns the passed string. Here you have how they respond to HTTP methods. So sum will be get request and echo string will be post. Let's see it in action. If I go back here, I have my new method in the hello service. Okay, and the sum method is, I can call it like this, and to pass the parameters, since it's a get method, I can simply do a equals 5 and b equals 2, and here is my result. So I already have an XData server running and responding, and with the server-side implementations. Well, this is how I create a basic XData server, and now the question is how I do call this method from the web client using WebCore. Let me create a new WebCore application here. TMS Web application. Here is my web application. First thing I need is a XData web connection. This is the client side. I'm building the web client here, and what it needs is the URL of my base server, which is running, as we have already confirmed from the browser. It's running at this address, and I can test it here. If I click connect here, it will actually connect to the server and retrieve meta information from it even at design time. So it's connected and it's working. And now I need an XData web client that will be used to perform low-level requests. It's not as low level as HTTP requests, but it's low-level requests to extract data from the server and execute methods like the sum. So after I drop a TMS XData web client component, I assign it to the connection, and I can add, let's do the add operation here. I add web edit, a second one here. Let's change the text to something like 10 and 5 and a button. And in the web button, I call this code raw invoke, and I have to pass the operation ID, which is exactly the name of the interface and the method. So whatever the interfaces are in my server and the methods, I just ask it to execute iHello service.sum, and I pass the parameters here. And here I have my client side executing the server method. You might have noticed here that I haven't handled the result here. One thing you have to have in mind is that in the web client, all calls to the server are asynchronous. So there is no way to get the results directly here. We have to use callbacks to retrieve the result. That's why we have another version of the overload method here. We can add a method to receive the callback, or we simply can use the XData web client events here on load, and using response.result, I have the JSON value returned by the server. I can also note here that the result is a JSON object with a value property. So that's what we have to do here, to cast this to a JSON object and get the value property here, and then we can convert it to a string. So let's do something like this: web button on dot caption equals to into string, cast it to integer, just to make it a more to explain better. So I'm getting the object, the JSON object, cast into integer because that's what it is, and then converting back into string to show in the web button. Let's run it here now. Okay, the TGS object is declared in unit.js. Okay, this is an important information here that you probably might fall into when you are developing the applications. There was an error connecting to the XData server. If I press F12 here, or developer tool, choose the developer tools here in the menu, is the same, or Ctrl+Shift+I, F12, or developer tools, I can see the console, the detailed errors in the browser console, and we can see here that the client failed to load because no access control allow origin header is present in the request resource. This is CORS in action here, which means that my web application is running in a server localhost 8000, which is the default port for TMS WEB Core, and my service, my REST service, running in 2001. So for security, the browser blocks you from requesting data from a server which the domain is different from the one you are running your web application. So it's very easy to add core support in XData. Let me go back, close my server here, go back to the server, and in the XData server, if I right click, I have edit middlewares. Middlewares I like filters that I can add to add functionality to my server, and there are some filters, middlewares available pre-available here. JWT, which is for authentication, compress, which is to return a response, compressed response, basic authentication, and CORS. So let me add CORS here. There is not much to, there are some configuration here that we don't need to add, and then run the server again. And okay, the server is, let's confirm that the server is running fine, and TMS WEB project here, let me rerun the application, and it now connects to the server. The error message is gone. If we look at the network here, we will see that there is a request to localhost TMS module, which is the information about the server that the client is returning here. So if I click web button here, we can see, let me open again the browser here. Let me click again here. We see that the request is done to TMS hello service sum, and the parameters are passed here. The response is provided by the server, and we have our response here. So that's how you implement server-side logic with XData. I believe you will agree with me that it's very easy to set up a server and add business logic to it. To add further logic, I can simply go here and, as I said, implement whatever procedure I want here, add code, and that's it. Return values if I want. I can pass objects, lists, and all types of information here, pass and receive. So that's how you, for example, if I want to return a customer, get customer, I can just return some object here, implement it somehow, and XData will manage all the routing and serialization, etc. And that's how you call from web client. Okay, this is the most basic level, but XData and WEB Core offers more, which is since most backends that you are going to write is based on a database. Data will probably come from a database. XData and WEB Core have lots of features that make it even easier and rad to deal with database information. First thing on the XData side is that you don't have to do something like this function get customer to customer. All right, you can do that. You have to declare a tCustomer object. You have to implement your server side, somehow performing SQL statements to the database in the implementation of your get customer here. You have to do select from customer, where some you can pass some parameters here like customer ID or filters, etc. And grab the SQL information and fill in the instantiate tCustomer objects, transfer data from the dataset to the object, and then return. This is possible, but you don't have to do that because XData makes it much easier. XData is integrated with TMS Aurelius. TMS Aurelius is an ORM, an object relational mapping framework, which makes all that translation conversion between objects and database information. So the framework will perform the SQL statements and create the objects directly and vice versa. And let me open here for this example here, I'm going to use a database, the Northwind database, an old one for a SQL Server. I'm opening the SQL Server management now so you can see it. Okay, let me connect to it. Here are some of databases. And here is the one we're going to use, the Northwind. It has some very basic data here, like a customers table with ID, information, etc. The regular database. Okay, and how do I extract such information from the database and expose it through XData server? Well, first of all, let me save the application here before I lose all my data here. Let me save it. Let's call it XData WEB Core. And let me save everything here. This is my server unit, the hello service. This is my main form unit for the TMS WEB Core. Project 3 will be XData server and project group. Okay, for the database connection, I'm going to use the T-Aurelius connection component. The T-Aurelius connection component is similar to other database components, but it's specific to Aurelius. If I double click here, I will have a kind of wizard to connect to the database. I can use the native driver support, which will connect to the database directly. For now, it has support for SQLite and Microsoft SQL Server. We are going to add very soon in this order, Postgres SQL Server and Firebird and MySQL. And so for now, since we're going to use SQL Server, I can just choose the driver and set the parameters for connection here. Connect to the Northwind database, use a trusted connection, test connection, and I'm already connecting to my database. Okay, note that just as a parenthesis here, I can use if I don't have SQL Server or SQLite, I can use an existing component to access the database. For example, I can use FireDuck. I can use the FD connection here, and I configure the FireDuck the same way I do. I'm used to, for example, the same parameters. Okay, so I'm connecting with FireDuck. If I double click the Aurelius connection, I can say, okay, don't connect to the database directly. Use an adapter component for me, so FD connection. It detects that it's a FireDuck component and it's connected to the SQL Server. And if I do this, note that Aurelius is now using FireDuck here to connect to the database. Okay, so I can use FireDuck to connect to Firebird, DB Express to connect to MySQL Server. I have all options here to choose the component you want and the database you want. But since Aurelius will more and more use the native driver, I'm going to use it to show you how it works. Let me delete the FireDuck here. So okay, let's test the connection again. It's working, and now I have the option here to right-click the component and choose Generate Entities from Database. What it's going to do, it will extract the existing database information, not tables and fields and types, etc. And I will be able to generate classes, Aurelius classes represented those tables in the database. I can choose the tables that I want to export to. Of course, I don't need to choose all. There is some advanced settings here that it's not the scope of this presentation. Here is a preview of the entities. Let me generate it here. And it has generated the classes. For example, a T customers, which is a Delphi object which will represent the table in my database. As you might guess now, I'm going to use those classes. Actually, XData and Aurelius is going to use those classes to interact with the database. So all my classes are mapped here. My database is abstracted as an object model. And let me save it here. Let's call this unit entities. And if I go back to my server unit here, and the XData server, I have to tell the XData server, here is my database connection, and please publish it all entities for me. Since the server will process several requests simultaneously using threads, a single connection is not enough. So I have to use a XData connection pool, which abstracts the connection as a pool of connection, and I simply have to associate the pool with the Aurelius connection that I have created here, and the server with the pool. And now XData knows about the connection and what is the default database connection. Finally, I just have to enable something here, which is the default entity set permissions, and I will say that I want to list my entities, allow to get, and I will enable insert, modify, and delete here as well, because I'm going to show you how to use it, but you can simply keep it read only, for example. You can optionally enable those settings for specific entities here. For example, I want my customers to be published, but not my orders and things like that. But let me publish everything here and run the server again. And if I go back to the tab here when I have access to my server, instead of hello service, I can try to access here customers. And here I have my customers published automatically from the database. So now not only I have server specific custom server side logic like the sum method, but I have the data available here. Of course, as I showed, there are even more options for you to control the access to it. As I said, if you can prevent users from inserting or modifying data here, or you can use events here. There is on entity get, on entity inserting, on entity lists that you can use those events to prevent users to access data or modifying data based on some criteria, based on the user, on the privileges of the user that it's accessing the REST server. You can even add filters here. For example, on entity list, I can add some filters here like criteria, and I can add some criteria here. For example, lists. By default, if the entity is a customer, please add a filter which is company ID equals to something. So you can have multi-tenant. You can filter your data based on extra criteria, usually based on the user that it's accessing the API. Anyway, note that this is not only a raw listing, but I can have here I have here a full syntax, full query syntax here. I can use order by, for example, order by ID in descendant order. Customer ID is the name. I can use, for example, paging. So, for example, okay, give me just the first 3 customers and skip the 12 first customers. So here's the data, so I can have paging. I can have a specific filter here, filter where company ID greater than 10, for example. Oh, sorry. Filter in this customer ID, the ID is a test. So let's filter where country equals to, let's see, there's something from UK here. No, so let's try the USA. And I have customers from USA here. Okay, so I have all this automatically published for me with all the authentication, all the security if you need to, but all the flexibility and the RED support. If I perform, I can get a default URL here. So for example, customers, bring me the customer with this ID here. Let's try to find a customer here. Bring me the customer with this ID. This is the endpoint for the customer. So if this is a GET request. If I perform a put request or delete request, I can change, modify this specific customer, delete it. If I do a post request for this URL here, I can create a new customer if I allow the server to do that. So I have a full CRUD here in a few clicks. All right, and all this power that I have here, I have also on the TMS WEB Core side. Let me show you how it works. If I open here the main form for the TMS WEB Core, instead of using the XData web client, which is fine for custom server-side logic, since I have raw data published by REST server, I can use XData web dataset. This is a more high-level way of working with XData server because it will use the convention that I show you in the browser for you, all the filtering, the endpoints, etc., and retrieve data in a higher level way. For example, and it works like a regular Delphi dataset. So you have the same feeling, the same knowledge that you have with the dataset. You can use here. You have field by name, you have data-aware controls, you have all the way that you do deal with the dataset. You have it here. So the setup is similar to a regular dataset. I said what is the connection, the XData connection this dataset is going to use. There is one. And once I do that, I have the module here. I have available all the entities that I have published there. For example, the customers. So with a few clicks, I said, okay, bring me the customers from my XData server. And I can do some paging also here. So for example, that query string, this part here, I can simply put a raw query string here and do the filter I want, or I can simply use, okay, bring me the first 20 customers, for example, to avoid receiving all the data from the server. And I can even add fields here if I want. That information is available at design time, so the dataset knows the fields between quotes, which are the properties of the objects that I want to have published here. And I'm not defining any field here. I just use the default ones. And the same way that I use the dataset in Delphi, it's a similar one here. I can use a data source, assign the data source to the dataset, and I can use, for example, WebDB grid. And assign to the data source. Okay, and let's put another button here and simply call XData web dataset load, and let's see if it works. Okay, let me run the server again here. And there we go. Let me open the console here, choose the network. I will refresh the page and see what happens when I click web button 2 here. Here is the request that XData web dataset performed. So it knows how to build a URL. You know that to grab the customers, I have to perform a request to the address TMS/customers. Since I asked for 20 customers, it already built the query part here, and that's it. That's a request, and the data is returned. And the nice data binding of TMS WEB Core works like Delphi. It binds the JSON data to the control, and I have here all my data right in a few clicks. And note that it looks like I'm working with a regular client server in Delphi, but it's all abstracted in this nice web paradigm where the application is JavaScript running in the browser and data is coming from as JSON from a REST server. Let me close the tabs here and go back to my application here. And I can use other controls as well. For example, the FNC grid, which is exactly the same control that you use in VCL application. So you can, it's a nice component because the look and feel and the code, it's exactly the same. as in the web or in the VCL or FireMonkey application. I can do the same setup here. Set the adapter. It's already set. Set the data source and set the adapter active. And with FNC Grid, I can modify data, and I will show you something here. Let's add another button. Let's call it apply and call XData web dataset apply updates. Let me open the console again so you can see the network traffic. Clicking the button will receive the customers here. We can see that it's all working fine. What happens if I change here this contact title from owner to employee, for example, and change this one to manager. Note that no network traffic is happening here because all data is being changed in the object. The JSON object, underlying JSON object, was updated here. If I go through the code, Pascal code here, and try to read properties of this object, of the second line of Ana Trujillo here, it will show that contact title property changed to employee. But only if I call apply updates, it will perform the needed requests to modify data in the database. This first one here are just a request with options. It's core in action here, cores in action here, and then we have two put requests here. One for customer Ana TR and the other for customer Anton based on these IDs. And we have the request here that it's a new JSON and the response was okay. The new object was updated, and that's it. It's even easy to modify data because all the convention. So again, the XData web datasets knows how to perform the proper requests, the address, what JSON to send to modify data. It's very easy to deal with it. If I refresh the page here and load the data again, we'll see that data is updated here. I can confirm it here, just performing a raw request to customers here. We see that Anna is changed to employee and Anton is changed to manager. All right. And of course, there are more and more options here for visual. For example, I can use a WebDB table control here, which is just a regular table, HTML table. Just the same way I can set the data source, run application, and I have my table here. By using a raw HTML table, I can add some styles. For example, it's easier to add styles since it's pure HTML control. So I can, for example, add bootstrap. I can say I can set some bootstrap classes here. table striped, and if I run here, I have my table already in a nice look and feel in the bootstrap style. So it's and then from now I can add paging. I can add some buttons here to click next previews to and retrieve data. And if you load the TMS business trial installer, or if you're a registered user, you see there is already a demo here that shows how to create an application. All these techniques with a bootstrap table and XData communication. There is a demo that you can use as a base. I will show it. Let me save it here. It's the XData music. There is a already built XData server. Let me close my previous one here. Let me run you can run the XData server that provides data and run the music application. This demo is available online. So I'm running locally here. It's the same technique, but here I have paging. I have I have searching, for example. I can search here. I can edit, save. It's all working here with the technique. That demo is also available online if you want to check. It's https app.devgames.com/xdata/music/app. And it's the same one, but you can try it already there. Here it is, paging and searching, for example. And if you check, it's interesting to show here. First, note it's responsive here. Note that it's not the filtering. All the database server operations, better say. If I press P here, another request it's being made, and this is not local. This is I'm communicating with a server, which is an Amazon server here. If I do, for example, Peter, it's requesting new data from the server. It's not client side, so it's not taking memory or doing logic at the client side. It's server side logic here. It's the same for ordering and things like that. All right. And there is one last thing I like to show you. Let me reopen that application we were building here with the XData server. Let me rerun the XData server that we use it to connect to the Northwind database. And there is now, we are almost ready to release this, the XData web generator. What does this wizard do? It will create a web client application with the CRUD operations from an XData server. If I can type the address of any XData server here. So this is the address of my current Northwind XData server, localhost 2001/TMS. I can test the connection. It's running. If I click next, the wizard will extract metadata information from the server, and here are the entities available. I can select the ones I want to create a form to edit, and if I click next here, I can choose the project location folder. Let me name it Northwind, for example, and it will ask if I want to create the folder. If I do, it will scaffold a complete new application as a front end to my XData server. Here is the project created, Northwind project. Let me drag it here, and if I run it now, I have automatic application front end for my server. Here is, for example, my customers table, which now has just like the music demo, but these were generated from the wizard. I have my application here with paging, server-side paging, server-side filtering, for example, server-side ordering, and this is just a teaser for you to see where we are going to, where do we want to go, which is a still better integration between WEB Core client and XData. And the idea is to have a scaffolding tool and later add more features, more enterprise application generation features with authentication and editing and all the initial stuff that you need to get your application up and running quickly, so you focus on your business logic. And of course, this is based on the Bootstrap template, so the application is responsive. And that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed it.